Dr. Bickmore's Why Wednesday in Conversation. And today my guest is Padma Venkatraman. And Padma and I go way, way back, further than either one of us want to remember, uh, probably. But I tell people all the time, I think she's the first author where I heard speak at Allen and I said, I must read that book. you know, so um, and so I've been watching her career, not from the very, very beginning, but I think the first book that I heard you speak about was Climbing the Stairs, and you had one book before that. So that was the issue that I've been following for a long time. And boy, you've had a really good career, I think, so far. And I hope that it's not over. And again, this is one of those opportunities for other people to get to know you and know a little bit about your work. Here you are, this young woman who builds another career, and then you decide you want to be a writer. So I'd like you to tell everybody about the fact that you're a pretty bright gal who earned a PhD, right? So tell us about that career a little bit and some of the groundbreaking work you really did there as well.
I think very few people know, you know me, Steve, but very few people know that I was an oceanographer before I became an author. And a lot of times people think, that oceanography is marine biology. And in my case, it actually wasn't. So it's more what I did was physical chemistry. And so I worked on pollution and pollutants at a time when, there wasn't quite as much of recognition and acceptance of what we are doing to our beautiful, beautiful earth at the time. It was a very unusual thing for a young Indian girl to dream about doing. I certainly didn't know anyone who was an oceanographer. And if I ever got a book that showed me that, it was certainly all male, white male. And when I came to oceanography school, I was like barely out of my teens. I was 20. I actually had immigrated or left India to go to England a year before that. So when I was 19, I left home, and everybody I knew and everything I knew went to England. And then after that, I came to this country when I was like barely 20 and didn't know anyone for miles around. It was Southern Virginia. It was quite an awakening in many ways. And I was the only BIPOC female in my incoming graduate class.
Yeah.
So I never really thought about it then. And for a while, I was a little bit shy, Steve. But now I own it because I think it is important to know that it was groundbreaking, and it's important to say, yes, I did that. And also to welcome the fact that nowadays we have so many more women and we still need so many more people of color. We still need more women in this field. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you did all that oceanography and I think ran a couple of big research projects sitting out in the ocean, and you ran a team. So it wasn't like you just finished your little degree and sat there in a classroom. You were out doing significant research and developing a career for a while. So I think that as people get to know you, they shouldn't ignore these things, because all these things, I think, continually feed into what you're doing now. And certainly that's, as we get to later talk about Safe Harbor is radically influenced by your experience as an oceanographer, as I think Island's End is. And so those kinds of things play on the sides of what what informs what you want to write about and how you're doing that. So you're doing this career, you're having this, and you think, oh, I should just write a book. So
Um, so actually, I feel like writing was my first love. I don't know if I told you this, Steve, but when I was really young, so my mom said that, she would see me sort of singing away in the garden, and she thought I was singing songs that, when I was really little, like two-ish or something, when I just started to talk. And she thought I was singing songs that were something that she had sung or something. But she came closer and she realized the tunes were off and they were my own little tunes and they were my own words. And so she came in and apparently I started, I would dictate to her and she found it, which I still find a little astonishing, but apparently I had this perfect idea of when the line should end. And she thought that was so weird that this little kid was like so super clear. She said, and stop writing there because I couldn't even write at that point.
Yeah.
And the next line begins. And now, as a poet, I sit there breaking my head, thinking, where should I break the line? But apparently, it was infinitely clear to me when I was like 2 years old.
Well, maybe you need to channel your inner 2-year-old and say, oh, the line just ends here. That's easy enough, Maybe you're working too hard at line endings when you were naturally gifted at it in the first place. So you started writing when you were little. Did you keep diaries and tell stories and that kind of business?
I can actually probably run and get one of them because William and Mary, this is so exciting, Steve. So William and Mary, where I went,
Yeah.
they actually asked me. So other people have asked if they could have like my papers, and I never really paid much attention. I was like, sure, maybe. But then when William and Mary asked, they invited me to be like one of their homecoming speakers several years ago. This was,
Oh,
smaller than it might otherwise have been, but it was so amazing. It was just so meaningful to me. I could barely keep from crying to do that. I mean, it was such an honor to be invited back. And they asked for my paper, so I was like, yes, it was just obvious to me. And so because of that, my mom, who had saved like stuff from when I was little, had at that time was moving, homes, and she sent me all the stuff from India. So I can just show you some of the notebooks.
yeah, go grab it. Grab it.
And these are not even the only ones. So she sent me cases of them. And actually, this is the diary that she kept when I was born, in which in her handwriting, which is very different from mine, she's written down like the stories and things that I said. Some of them sometimes are like half in Tamil because I was using 2 languages at the time. So, and then, so then you have like my silly little poems and in my horrible kitty handwriting.
Well, it's good to have those things. What you need to start doing is, like you said, either give them to a library or start paying your daughter to scan them and make them all digital. Right?
Yeah, so William and Mary's actually asked for all of them. So they took a bunch of things and then I have to send these things to them. And they are, they keep them in some temperature controlled room.
Yeah, good.
Scan them and stuff. So that's really nice.
That's so you said you were doing 2 languages. Which language were you doing besides English? Because you always done English, right?
And
But
Tamil. Actually, Tamil was my first language.
okay.
So that was my mother tongue. That was the language I learned first. But I think very quickly I was attracted to English because there were beautiful books in English all over the place at home. And I mean, I have some books that I have from my childhood in India here with me, which are Tamil books, but they're not as well illustrated. And even the paper is, not exactly, because we didn't have board books and stuff. All of those things were in English. So
in English. Yeah, I know just enough about India to be dangerous, right? That I know there's lots of languages, there's lots of regional languages that people grow up in, but still primarily the language of government and commerce is primarily in English, right? For trying to keep that, what, 1,000,000,001 or 1,000,000,2 people, kind of still what the world's largest democracy, right? So we can think of that in terms of that. So here you are as a child, obviously connected to stories and reading and doing all those kinds of things as you and I have talked about in the past. But at what point did you say, okay, I'm going to kind of give up an academic career and I'm going to do a writing? And I don't know that we've ever talked about this. Did you do the two simultaneously for a while? So
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I first came to this country, I was I wrote for kids magazines in India and that sort of thing. So, I loved to write. And then I did write poems. So I got a couple of poems published in like literary magazines here. It was something I sort of did. And then I started writing for, I wrote a couple of things that I think were published in Cricket magazine here, that kind of thing. Um,
See, I didn't know that. That's all new. See, so I didn't know that you were dabbling with poetry and writing for magazines back in India and then doing cricket. And as I've done a lot of interviews this year, I'm finding that quite a few of you dabble with highlights or cricket or something as trying to say, okay, can I write? Will people publish my writing? So you were doing a little bit of that then.
I was
Okay.
actually highlights too. So highlights was one of the places that took my work early on. And actually highlights was big for me because at that time, I didn't have a lot of money. Like I didn't even have money to talk to my mom. I think about this all the time. Like now I can talk to my mom every day almost, she's
Yeah.
in India because we have all this stuff. But at that time, you and I remember that we didn't have any. We had those old phones and I had to save and scrimp and save really. And then I could maybe talk to her for 3 minutes once a week when I came here,
Yeah.
and the lines were always like, you couldn't hear it because of static. And you'd be like, hi, how are you? So it was a very different, different time of, homesickness had a whole different feel to it.
Yeah.
And and all of that. But oh gosh, I don't know why I got a little bit sidetracked now. I feel like what was I
No,
talking
it's fine. You were, yeah, all these things. The difficulty of communicating and being isolated, and along the way. So
Oh
your
yes, I was writing.
islands. What's the date of Islands End?
Island's End is, I think, it came out. It is my second novel. So Climbing the Stairs was my debut novel.
Oh, so Climbing the Stairs was first. Okay,
Yeah, it was
okay,
first. So before that, there were like I didn't even know what, I really didn't know what I was doing. At some point, I'd come across like these more kind of biography, but very sort of, I want to say very textbooky biographies and
uh-huh,
things. And actually, when I came to this country, I had this idea that everything was fine and perfect in America. Yeah, they had problems in the past, but it's all solved. And I was actually very surprised that as a woman, I was still facing issues in my field in the United States.
yeah,
Um, and so that was kind of a wake up call. And I quickly realized that there was not really an understanding of how many women had contributed to the field in terms
yeah,
of just mathematics, even and so on. So I kind of was reading a lot about that. I started reading on my own about like Black history and so on because I was like, okay, so where, what happened? I mean, being in Southern Virginia, I told you about this
yeah,
was a bit of a wake up call. I mean, we had a noose hung in our yard and, funny things like that. I mean, funny in the sense, horrific, actually. I shouldn't say the word funny, horrific racism. But those things made me very interested in, indigenous history, in Black history, in all of which is United States history, and also in the contributions of women to the sciences. And so I
yeah,
started kind of writing. So that was one of the books that sort of came out, but it was like, I can't even remember what press. And I didn't know anything about agenting. I didn't know anything about writing. It was for me just, hey, a couple of extra bucks here, as a student, sent it off. So I feel like I didn't take myself seriously as a writer
yeah,
enough to
yeah.
climb the stairs. So when you found me was when I started to really say, yeah, I'm a writer. I love writing. I love this. I want to develop my craft. I want to be a writer.
Yeah, that's well, and I I don't know if you know this, but when I heard you speak at Allen and you were a single speaker, right,
Yeah,
with Climbing the Stairs, that's really rare with a debut novel.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
That's really rare. So, and I didn't know it at the time because it was my first or second Allen. I was just a new professor. Um, I'd maybe been once or twice, but I didn't know anything. I was just trying to throw myself into it. So your publisher really wanted to push you at the time, and I don't know if was Nancy connected to you then too?
she was, but
Yeah.
little less intimately. So she was the publisher, I think, of the
Yeah.
issue, but
But she pulled a lot of sway and has pulled a lot of sway with Alan because she's been around a long
yeah,
time. So that in retrospect, you were given a really big opportunity to be a single speaker as kind of a debut novelist. And I've got to say, for me at least, you hit it out of the park. You were, very engaging and really in some ways, like I said before, sold your book. Climbing the stairs became a really important work for me because I knew right away I could write about it. I knew that I thought, oh, I have something to say about this book. Plus, I'm learning so much about the period because I'm learning about India's role in World War II. I'm learning about women of the period and what it was like even to be in their house, right? Because
yeah,
the metaphor of climbing the stairs is, well, the stairs is where the men get to go and see all the books. And can this girl get up those stairs? And some people want to pull her down the stairs, and a couple of people are giving her access to the stairs, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so I learned, a lot about the other political leaders besides Gandhi and philosophers who were leading the way, both in terms of nonviolence, but also do we as Indians have a role
right.
in World War II that had to be conflicting because they're still, you know, being overseen by the British in some really troubling ways. There's all those kinds of things that are going on. So it's a book that I would hate to say it's only a book about female self-discovery because it's certainly
Yeah,
much richer than that.
yeah,
In not to belittle that message, right? Because that message is important. But I thought, okay, this is a book that's not going away for me. And I've taught it several times. In fact, one of the first graduate seminars um, I taught it, and Sybil Duran ended up using it as one of the two or three books in her dissertation where she was looking at diversity people and how they were represented in young adult literature at the time. So it's the book. It's had an impact in ways that I think are bigger than people might realize, right? And
yeah,
and I wish it was. Well, there's only a few of you that were even publishing Indian American authors at the time, right? Two or three of you with any kind of reputation at all. Climbing the Stairs, Born Confused, um, are about the only two, really. And then a few more hit a few years later. So when that book hit, were you still working as a professor or a researcher?
I had just about started to take some daring steps a little away. Like I restricted my own, so I could have become a proper full-blown professor. But I was like, well, let me hold off and see how the writing does. And that was really scary, but I realized at that point, I also realized that there was no way that I could be the writer I wanted to be and the mom I wanted to be, because by then I knew that I wanted to be a mom, and the professor I wanted to be. I felt like that was just too much for me. Um, and I want to say that was me and my choice. I mean, Donna Jo Napoli is a person who I am just like in awe of that person. I mean, that woman is the mom of, I don't know, she has so many children. She's just she has more energy. She's a professor, if I'm not mistaken, at Swarthmore in linguistics or something. I mean, and she's so prolific as a writer of so many excellent books. So but I just felt like for me, I just couldn't do all of that.
Yeah, we have to thrive in our own wheelhouse, and I think
Right.
you're smart to try to do that. Because before I met you, I finished my PhD and had to go back to teaching full time for 3 years, and I only published one academic article when I was teaching high school. I found it very difficult to teach full time and to write any kind of academic work. So I'm always amazed when I find people who are full-time teachers and can write or they really crank stuff out in the summer. But I always found that very, very difficult. And I became fairly productive and prolific as an academic, but certainly I would have found that very difficult if I'd have stayed in the high school classroom. So you have to make these choices. And I say climbing the stairs is older than your daughter, right?
It is older than my, yes, basically. I know. So and you know, it's still in print, which I'm so excited and happy for. And I think it's because of people like you. And I know that the, you know, publisher did have very high expectations. I mean, unfortunately, it feels like the publisher has very high expectations of all my books, and sometimes, you know, the world has not yet given me some of the things that, you know, in retrospect, I sometimes think, and I know some people will be like, oh, she's so conceited if I say that, but I do think they deserved things that they didn't necessarily get, but that's neither here nor there. Um, but you know, it's, I think, wonderful and heartening for me that the book still makes an impact. I mean, Climbing the Stairs, I sure I probably didn't tell you, but I think last year I got this email, not email actually, from, it was on Instagram. This woman connected with me. She's in Peru, and she told me she went to college because Climbing the Stairs was such a profound book for her. And of course, the battle in Climbing the Stairs is the girl, you know, one of the battles
Yeah.
is the girl going to college. And then I met this like I shouldn't say random person, but this random person was Latina. And she said to me, you know, your book changed my life. And she said she went to college because of Climbing the Stairs too. And I think, you know, those things are just immeasurable gifts, you
Yeah.
know, beyond any award, beyond any recognition, beyond any author. That's just, I mean, honor. That is so profound. And I'm so grateful to have been even, you know, in some way a part of someone's life for that to happen.
Well, it's tricky, right? The whole world of publishing is tricky.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think you can, you know, if I have this kind of list that I keep of 3 or 4 authors that I think I wish they knew more of. So I try to talk about them all the time, and you're one of those. But at the same time, the accolades for your work have always been quite good by academics and the journals and those kinds of things. You get good Kirkus reviews, you get, you know, local and regional awards. You're nominated. I mean, if people want to go to your webpage and look at the books, and all of them get recognition from the publishing world, but the publishing world isn't always run by what they say, because they still have to find that readership, right? They still have to do that. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to interview you again is because since COVID, and certainly since 2016, the world for publishing and talking about your books and getting your books out there changed, right?
Yeah.
It's become more difficult. So I know that you do school visits and you do small conferences like you did for us in Las Vegas. Those kinds of
And
things
a
have
big
been,
conference thanks to you when you
well,
asked me to do the opening keynote for Alan.
yeah. Well, listen, that's, you know, if people are to look at that program and see, that was a dream come true that year, because as the president, you get to choose who you want to do single speakers. And of all the single speakers, we only had one white cisgender person, and that was Joe Knowles. Everyone else was a speaker of color, or and primarily women. I think Randy Rebay was the only one that was a male, I think, and he was high on my list at the time as well. But I think that, how are you guys navigating that now? Because, you know, you've struggled with trying to get enough people to look at your work, because when they do, we can tell the stories. We know that people are impacted by reading your book. Certainly, you know, The Bridge Home and Born, you know, those books have found audiences maybe beyond expectations in some ways, but I don't know that they're any. Born Behind Bars isn't any better than Climbing the Stairs. I don't think it's maybe even better than you know, Islands. I always Islands End. But so I would say the bulk of your work is steady and
Yeah.
strong. So how are you doing to fight the battle of closed down schools and the closing down on diversity and the fact that we can't, in some states, even use the term diversity, equity, and inclusion anymore? We can't say those words because, well, they might make somebody feel bad, or we don't want to talk about that. So what are you doing, Padma? What do you do?
It's really hard because actually Born Behind Bars was challenged. It was, in I think Pinellas County in Florida. Anyway, those after the book challenges and things came in. And then there was one time when I think this was last year during Banned Book
Yeah,
Week.
it was just last year, right?
Yeah,
About
it was because I
September,
yeah,
October.
for the YA Wednesday blog, I wrote
Yeah.
and it was a shocking thing. So I was, just before I was scheduled to fly out, like within 24 hours, I checked into my flight. I get this email message from the person who had invited me at the school, thinking that it's going to be the usual sort of, hello, how are you? We're so excited, tomorrow. No, it was, can you please take these slides out? We don't want you to make any compare. Basically, their message, which was, not explicitly stated in this way, but it explicitly said, you need to take these slides out. And the slides were slides that, talked about equity, inclusion, and also made the parallels between, Born Behind Bars, which is about this kid who was
Yeah.
growing up incarcerated because his, mom's been unjustly shoved into prison in India, at jail, I should say. And what's going on in this country with, inordinate numbers of innocent Black Americans being incarcerated. And they're like, no, 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 you can't talk about this. And I thought, my goodness, what a strange thing. And then, I know, although this particular librarian fought really hard, so it didn't happen, but even the Bridge Home, which, has sold over 250,000 copies and all of this, was challenged, and that too in one place by an Indian family, because they said I shouldn't talk about poverty. They said I shouldn't talk about Indians who are Christian. So, you get it from all sides. So there are people
Yeah.
who say I shouldn't talk about brown people who are strong and protagonists. I shouldn't talk about strong female protagonists, but there are also people who are brown saying I shouldn't. So there's like I don't know what. Like, I mean, India has been a country which has welcomed people of all religions for so long. And for me to and not showcase that, and I think it's particularly important in this climate, in the world, when people are getting so, a little hyper sensitive and angry and hateful about differences, to celebrate the fact that there are wonderful people in India who are Hindu and Christian and Jewish and Muslim and everything else. And you need to see that in my books. Like, you need to see diversity everywhere in our books too, in terms of religion and everything. So it has been a very difficult time for me to see all of that kind of thing
Yeah.
going on. I think I have felt a little bit, there are times when you go through it. I said to you too, there's been an up and down time for me. And of course, I see so many things in the world that I should be grateful for in my own life.
Sure.
And the fact I'm sitting in this beautiful room talking to you,
Yeah.
and you've been such an amazing source of support for me every step of the way, Steve. And that I can never tell you how much it means.
Well,
And those things
you deserve it. You've done the hard work. You've done the writing, right? Um, it's I'm always reminded of one of my favorite adult novels is The World According to Garp, right? Well,
yeah,
Garp's a reader. He's not a writer. I can be the reader, but I hope I'm the kind of reader that values the writers, right? And and
yeah,
it's been great to kind of promote your work whenever I can and to talk about it. And I look forward to having a chat in Boston as well. But it's I struggle that as you guys find it less easy to get to schools, less easy to
yes,
get to conferences,
yes.
even to do
So
book signings at bookstores is that.
it's
And I think
huge.
publishers are less willing to risk. I think they're promoting what they feel as are safe books or books that they can sell without the trauma.
Yeah,
They are businesses after
yeah,
all, right?
yeah. I mean, I can
But
understand
at
that.
the same time, you know, somebody had to publish James Baldwin, somebody had to.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that Penguin is continuing to publish me, honestly. And, I'm glad that they actually tried to take on some of the book banners. I'm really proud that Penguin
Yeah,
did that in my house. But it has been hard. Uh, there, there are times now when I look back and I think, yeah, there are things that haven't happened, and there are things that have happened that are not nice, like the book banning and the tremendous drop. So I was booking, I don't, at one point I looked at the number and it was like a 75% drop. That was already last year after, but you
yeah,
can't really say it happened because of this, because you can't draw, it's not like a scientific causal effect, but you
right,
can
yeah,
see the trend and you can say, yeah, I'm sure it happened because of
yeah,
this. Because as soon as the challenges came about and everything, I was, on Twitter, people would call me an activist author, this kind of nonsense. And then this drastic drop off in my school visits, which had been
yeah,
so successful and so that is hard. You do struggle. It's a financial
yeah,
hardship. It's also an emotional hardship. And I think, it's hard because I think I have felt sometimes kind of neglected even by the South Asian, younger South Asian authors who come up and don't know. And I feel like I've been somebody who always promoted and helped them. And sometimes it does feel a little frustrating to feel, forgotten or whatever. But I also celebrate, and I'm so glad to see so many more voices.
yes, so many more
That's
voices.
heartening.
I think it's true that, there are more voices. We have done, publishers and academics in the last 5 years have done better. I think there's some of us that we're always trying to be inclusive in what we're choosing
Yeah,
to teach and
you always do.
promote, but I think that the awards have gotten a little better. And another thing that I'm not sure that we've ever talked about, since you're a conscientious mom and a conscientious writer, when do you what is your writing schedule like? How do you approach a day?
It's really quite a challenge. So, one of the things that I try really hard to do, especially because my child is now a 16-year-old. So, I am driving her all over creation all the time, as you know. So, I feel like, chauffeur is my first job description, and um, my second thing is uh, uh, probably writing. And also I really want to be there for her. I feel like, as a teenager, she speaks to me, she shares things with me, and I feel like that is so much more vital, right? She's a wonderful person. I will only have her for a couple more years. After that, she'll go off to college, as you know, and then, you kind of lose. It's not the same thing. So
Yeah,
I basically try to write whenever she's away and try to get everything done in the time that she's away. And then I try to be there for her as soon as she comes back all the time, so that, if she has questions or whatever, anything she's worried about, she can talk to me. And after being like a woman in a man's field for so long, definitely now, because I write and writing is so much more flexible, we are much more sort of at home, traditionally sort of gender. I don't know. We take on the more traditional gender roles of, me being female, me being much more in the kitchen, doing sort of household work and looking after Karuna and that kind of thing, versus what my husband does, which is fine. I mean, that's how, it ended up in this time. But that also means that I have the time I get for writing tends to be quite limited. So when she leaves, I try to do everything I can when she's away.
yeah. So do you set goals 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, or are you just happy if you get your butt in a chair at all in the day?
I think it's more like that. Um, yeah, I feel like anytime that I can get my writing time in is amazing for me. I do try to get at least a little bit in, and in on those days, because they do happen, the days that I end up, I don't know what, putting the clothes out or whatever, which I haven't done, by the way. That's why I'm thinking of it now. But I try to mentally connect with my characters. That helps me a lot. So even like before, I go to sleep, I sometimes like invite them in. And for me, one of the big things has been that I know when I'm really in a book, when I'm not like watching the book like a movie, but when I'm experiencing the book from the inside. So I'm dreaming as if I am one of the characters, not like I'm seeing one of the characters. It's a point of view thing. I'm like inside that person's point of view.
I think you told me that when you were writing A Time to Dance, that was
Yeah.
the big breakthrough. When the character kind of congealed with you and was with you all the time,
Yeah.
then it became easier to find that poetic voice and
Yeah.
write that, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's fair to say that you'd be one of those writers that say the character is really a dominant force,
Yeah.
getting a real vital view of what the character is and what the needs of that character are going to be drive then the plot of the novel.
Absolutely.
So do you try to write vignettes of the character, or do you try to see a plot as you go forward?
It changes from novel to novel. And sometimes it's like one scene that is just, so etched in my memory or stands out. I mean, in Island's End, which, unfortunately now was subjected to soft censorship so much, it's not even in print. It's my only book that wasn't in print. And it is what it is. In spite of doing so well, I mean, got all these starred reviews, or 5-star reviews, I think, and all this. Yeah, Kirkus, like you said, has always been so kind to me and giving me starred reviews, which is always fantastic, and all those things. But it's still out of print. But I was just thinking, with Islands End, I saw this girl standing on this cliff face, and I could just see, the way she was standing. I knew she was a leader, and I think we've spoken about this before, that in some ways my own battle to be a leader, at sea with a bunch of men, kind of came into that story in a different way. And I think that's kind of what happens, is sometimes it comes from there with, with the Bridge Home, it just flowed. With some things it flows, with A Time to Dance, it took me a while to find her voice, and then it just flowed and gelled. So I don't really know, but I think I have some idea usually about where the book is starting, where the book is ending. And it's the middle part, which is really the book, that I kind of have to, journey through.
So do you revise as you go, or do you struggle to get a draft first?
I don't revise as I go necessarily. Sometimes I feel as though the drafts are all jumbled. So the drafts are not in order from beginning to end. So the drafts are sometimes like, I know what's going to happen in the end. I have a vague idea that this is probably going to be somewhere here. And sometimes I have to then change them and reorder them because they're all over the place.
So your editor loves you, in other words. Is that what you're telling me?
Also, by the time I send it to her, though, I usually do order them in some form. But she does love me because I send her a lot of rubbish, and then I think she sees the gold in it. It's almost like they say, I don't know what a diamond looks like, but they say they look really ugly before they're cut. I mean,
right.
I definitely send her stuff that she then needs to polish or helps me polish. I mean, she doesn't polish for me.
Yeah, they say, oh, this is great, but it would look better if you considered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1,000, right? They send you all the notes. That's really great. I love how you openly admit that you're. I feel like if I were a writer, I would be a little bit like that, kind of chaotic. That I would have scenes and things that because even academically, I kind of wrote like that. I would see, my advisor on my PhD, Peters, would always say, well, what's the kernel of the problem, and if you can find the kernel, then you can build from it. But you might have to hunt through the data before you find out what the kernel is, right? Safe Harbor. Tell us a little bit about Safe Harbor, and what are you trying to do with Safe Harbor?
All right, I will tell you, I think on the one hand, it's got pastels, it looks different from my other work. And I was thinking about what one point I was talking to Laurie Halse Anderson, uh,
Ah,
or maybe I was just listening to her. I can't remember anyway. She was talking about prom and how she was in such a good place in her life and she just wanted to write something happy and uplifting, and everybody was like, no, you're Laurie Halse Anderson, you have to write something like deep and you know um it, about something that's very sort of internally sad. And I felt as though, so one of the things with, and by the way, I mean, obviously you've read this, there are some really serious themes and I hope they
yes.
don't get overlooked in this, because one of them, I realize I don't think about the theme like ahead of time. So I'm not thinking this is something I want to write about, right? But it comes out. And I think it always something I feel really strongly comes out. And one thing I felt very strongly is that even though, and I didn't say it in these words in the book, but I do want to say it to you because I think it's important. Even though these days we are seeing kids with mental health issues in books being portrayed as protagonists who are strong, there is such a cliche. And even today, even a book that I reviewed for the New York Times, although I didn't say it, but because I don't want to say negative things about authors, especially authors of color and women authors, but all authors of today, I don't want to. But it really bothered me when I see it bothers me when I see parents portrayed as completely checking out if they have mental health issues, right? Again and again and again, you see this, and sometimes it's a device so that the
You're right.
kids take on, but it's not okay. And I think I have been having some really, difficult issues. I live with depression. I always have. I had a difficult childhood. I live with a lot of things that I carry from there. But I like to think, although you should probably check with my daughter, that I am a pretty good mom, and it really irritates me. And I think we need more moms like the mom in Safe Harbor.
Yeah.
And of course, she's not the main character, but I think it's a very important aspect of the book. And I
But
think
I
it is
think that's changing.
groundbreaking.
Don't you think
Yeah,
you see it a little bit more than we did in the past?
yeah,
Because that used to be one of the hallmarks of young adult and middle grades fiction is that the adults were removed,
right.
right? But I think giving well constructed adults,
Yeah,
both who are competent and doing well, and some who have their own foibles, but at
right,
least give us round characters that are
right.
adults instead of flat characters
Right.
that are
No,
adults.
that is definitely happening. But I have yet to meet a mom with depression who is a good mom. And that's what we have here.
Yeah.
She's independent, she's good, she is actually a scientist, all of those things I like to think I was too. And she's a good mom. And I just feel that was important to me. I also see, you do see much more nowadays than when I first started writing. You
Yeah.
see parents who are divorced or separated. My parents in India, very, very unusual, were separated. Um, and so I think I felt like I wanted that rather than a parent who's dead. Lots of people have dead parents. Um, and so that was something, but also I wanted to see kids who were brown, who were involved in um, the environment, because, ultimately people who are BIPOC are going to be more affected by climate change, just in terms of how the world is and all of that sort of thing. And then I have seen a lot of reluctance in terms of people who are BIPOC, also saying that they are for environmental issues, because it has felt for a long time as though the environment was divorced from humanity, which it shouldn't be, and it isn't. I feel like nature is part of what humans are, right? We're part of nature. But there's been this sort of artificial construct that separates the two. And a lot of people, including me, used to feel very uncomfortable. And I never called myself an environmentalist, even though I am in many ways
Yeah.
exactly that. It's dedicated so much of my life to doing that. And even now, if I'm not a scientist, I still volunteer, like just like the girl does here, doing things for the environment, because I think it's so important. And so I think it was very important for me to have dark-skinned scientists doing that, which happens in this book, and you don't usually see that. So I think that was very important, that even if there are kids who are doing it, often the scientists that you see are white. And no, I wanted to show that. And I think that's also pretty groundbreaking in my book. That said, I have to say there's a part of the book that is just, it's about a seal. It's about a girl who loves music like I did, who was bullied at school because she's different like I was. And she is an immigrant, which I was much later. But she is walking along this beach. She finds a stranded seal and she tries to save it. So, yeah, I don't know. I always loved books when I was a kid where, you have the kid rescuing the animal. And I think that
Well,
urge
it's a wonderful book. So is it going to be marketed middle grades, upper elementary?
I think it should be marketed upper elementary, Steve. And I was actually really surprised when I saw the arc. And I asked Nancy, and she said, yeah, I completely agree. But I don't know why it says 10 and up, because it really isn't. I feel like it's a much younger audience, and that I
It could
really
be.
want to get out there. I mean, I think it's more, upper elementary, and
Well,
sometimes
kids always read up. If it says 10, 8-year-olds are going to read it. I'm going to take it to my granddaughters right
Yeah.
away. But I want to read one line that's early in the book. And like you say, it's clear, and the issues of the mother are clear from the beginning. But on page 3, where this little girl is wondering about her life as they land, and she's talking about hope. And I love these 2 lines. But I guess hope is a cork that never stops bobbing on the waves of life's ocean. And I thought, okay, I need to remember that in my own life. Hope, optimism, this is all those kinds of things. Yeah, that cork just keeps floating, right? And maybe that's what we need to do as we go forward. We need to talk about this book and review it, and I should get somebody to do it as a weekend pick soon, and maybe I'll make my granddaughters read it and interview them about the book too, because it's right in their wheelhouse of doing that. One's 4th grade, one's 6th grade, so they'll be all hot on this topic as well. Well, Padma, it's been so great to talk to you, and I look forward to seeing you again in Boston. But keep me posted on what's new. Any new projects besides Safe Harbor? Something you're working on?
So I'm so excited, and I think I'm allowed to show you. And even if I'm not, I'm going to show you anyway, so it's allowed. So my first picture book is coming out in 2026, and I'm so super excited about it. Here, you can see this is out of the sketch. It's not the final arc. It's called Faraway Family, and I love it. I just love that picture book.
Good. See, look at your range. They're asking you to do other things. That's so great. Well, good. We have lots of things to talk about and things to keep going. So we will talk again.
Yes, thank you so much.